Hello and welcome back. Today I wanted to do the first of two reviews on the new shoto sabers from Bendu Armory. Now shoto, if you're not familiar with the concept, a shoto saber is a smaller saber either used in your offhand or two of them used for jarakai or dual wield sabering. So it's designed to be more easily handled with one hand as opposed to something like the radium hilt from Bendu Armory that's a two-handed saber, or something like the obsidian hilt that's their curved saber that's a little bit longer. But if you look at the size of this, the button would go right here, so I've got a lot of sabers sticking out on the bottom, as opposed to a shoto, where I still have a lot of sabers sticking out on the bottom, but less so. It's more suited for one hand. Right. This specific one is their Feldspar model. Now, all of the naming conventions from Bendu Armory are named after geology, so they're all named after rocks. The staff is an adamite, their original saber was an obsidian, the radium is their two-handed. So this is the Feldspar, which is which is one of their new models. Now, a couple things about the Feldspar. Like all of their sabers, or like all of their sabers that are not their metal ones, this has a very organic look to it. That's because it's made out of a carbon fiber injected into a mold. So you have carbon fiber weave underneath, you have carbon fiber fibers on top. I couldn't help but name parts of this saber just because it has that sort of very organic, almost H.R. Geiger look to it. This up here I kind of refer to as the rib cage, and then down here we've got the cuticle because that thing kind of reminds me of a fingernail. This right here, actually the cuticle on top of that fingernail stops here, so it actually kind of looks like a crab to me, but very organic notes to it. So a couple things about this design. It is a shoto, so it's designed to be smaller and easier to handle with one hand. That said, it's not substantially smaller than their obsidian model. If you see their obsidian and you see it with the shoto here, it is smaller, but it's not substantially smaller when you look at overall length. What you are dealing with, though, is a lot less material out here at the end. This is almost an embellishment, whereas this right here is larger and much more substantial. So there's less to this in terms of material, in terms of weight, and this one has a tendency to shift the balance towards the top here because Bendu Armory sabers, the chassis that comes with these, is very emitter heavy because this is all metal right here. So that means that when you're riding with this thing, you end up with a lot of empty space at the end. With the shoto, it goes pretty much all the way to here. So this is the only bit hanging off at the end. And so it doesn't have that sort of hollow feeling at the end, and it shifts the weight much more into the main saber. So it's a little bit easier to use that way. So some things about this. On the back of this thing here, we have the place where you put the set screw for the blade, and this place right here for either a screw or a cover tech wheel. Now, if I were to put a cover tech wheel on this, you notice that the back here is all pretty much, it's the raised portion, and it's all pretty much flat and uniform. So it looks pretty good with a cover tech wheel right there, set screw for the blade right there. All right, and this one of the interesting things that I mentioned about the Bendu Armory sabers is they make excellent belt hangers because of the fact that this carbon fiber is so durable. You don't have to worry about hitting it on anything. If you actually wear a saber around at a convention, you'll sit down in a seat and it'll bonk on the seat. You'll get into your car and you'll hit it on the door. But the Bendu Armory sabers, because they are that carbon fiber, you don't have to worry about dinging them up. You might make a little ding in the clear coat if you really hit it hard enough, but most of the time it's not going to do anything to it. One of the bad parts about carbon fiber, though, is that the way that you get this sort of organic look to it, it's injection molded, which means it is going to be prone to imperfections. In past, I've had them, you can see a little seam right here on this. It's not very noticeable, but it is something that you'll see if you're looking for it. Carbon fiber sabers have seams. I've also noticed in past that sometimes the weave will ride up on the embellishment or the embellishment will ride down on the weave. In this particular one right here, we've got some of the spot of black right here from the fiber stuff getting on top of the weave itself. So they try to minimize that as much as they can. I usually don't have too much, or haven't seen too much of the one sort of material bleeding into the other. But if you're one of those perfectionists who's looking at your saber and is checking all the lines and everything like that, the carbon fiber sabers, because they have that organic look to them, are going to have imperfections. So look for them and you'll find them, either differences in the way or in the direction of the weave, like right here. You can kind of see that little rise there. That's because the fibers here are going a slightly different direction than the fibers here. So nice design, prone to imperfections. The weight is vastly improved. A couple of things also interesting about this area right here that I referred to as the crab right above the cuticle. This is a raised area that's not a different color from the rest of the saber. So you could paint this, or you could actually take a Dremel tool or something like that and etch into the clear coat right here and put a symbol or something on that for customization. It just provided an interesting little frame for that. This spot right here is a lowered area right by the sound vents on the underside of the fingernail there. And this area, it's interesting to me, kind of odd that they made these raised and lowered things without either putting more carbon fiber weave or something like that, but it is a place where you could apply some paint or something like that to customize it yourself. It's kind of odd that the detail's there, but the detail's not offset by a color difference. The other issue that I have with these is, as a shoto saber, it does handle pretty well. It handles well one-handed. Because you've got this uniform hilt though, because there's no rises and there's no choke points, you do have a tendency, if you're using this as a shoto, if you're using it one-handed, especially with a heavy grade blade, centrifugal force as you spin is going to pull it. And if you're not careful with your grip, you're going to find your hand riding lower and lower on this thing, and you might find yourself losing your grip on it or having to readjust back up. Okay, since these little raises there, they're enough to gain a little bit of purchase, but not enough to gain a lot of purchase. So this would be great for dueling, where you're not dealing with a lot of centrifugal force because you're dealing with more precise movements that stop. But for spinning, it does have a tendency to get away from you because the emitter is heavy. If the blade is heavy, it's pulling that way rather substantially. All right, so this is the Feldspar shoto. I will be doing the andesite shoto next, which is the companion piece to this. But join me back for that one, and we'll finish up with the shotos.